Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh. There's something about becoming a grandparent. Sometimes even grandparents can't explain the joy, love, and intensity of the emotions that surface with grandchildren. We'll be talking today about all of that with Paul Gallant, a man who, with his wife, made the bonding process a mission and an international one at that. A book titled A Grand Journey, The Unexpected Story of the Gallant Family, chronicles that mission as told to former Post-Dispatch reporter, editor, and now writing coach and author Dick Weiss. Paul Gallant's with me in studio. Dick joins us by phone. Paul, welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
And Dick, welcome by phone.
Thank you. Good
Dick,
to be on.
Let me start with you, Dick. Can you give me a one-paragraph explanation of what this story is all about?
Well, this is Paul and Deanne Gallant's book about how over 30 years they bonded with their grandchildren in a very interesting way, with two of them taking them around the world, and with another, with her granddaughter, kind of keeping track of her as she went on her own journey, mostly around the country.
I'm sorry, Paul.
No, Dick is right. It's a 35-year run here.
35 years. How did it all get started, Paul?
Well, if we talk about granddaughter number one, or the grandchild number one, our daughter was married and divorced, and we raised the first granddaughter from age 2 to 14, and that was kind of some issues. Okay,
that's Melissa?
That was Melissa, and Dick met Melissa, and Dick really kind of helped change her life. I mean, I give Dick a lot of credit. It was really a catharsis for her in maybe helping redirect her energies. By that time, by 14, somewhere in there, we had two grandsons. Mm-hmm. And Melissa, when she lived with us, we traveled the United States. You know, it's a Disney World, Disneyland, typical parental thing, but this was with a grandchild. And she went to live with her dad here in St. Louis. So the grandsons are then born from our son and daughter-in-law, and at the age of 6, one being 6, one being 9, we decided that we would try a journey. And it was really a Hanukkah gift because, as you know, Hanukkah, you run every night for 8 nights, you bring presents, and fortunately, my son and daughter-in-law always made a wonderful income and could buy anything. So at the age of 6 and 9, we decided to take them on a trip, okay? Where'd we go? We went to Cancun, one of those typical packages, 7 days, X number of nights. It was wonderful. Yeah, the kids were terrific. We bonded. They ate everything they wanted to eat. You know, we were grandparents. We didn't care if they ate ice cream for breakfast. Nothing mattered. So when we got back, and this is all over the Christmas break for school, when we got back, they both said, so where next year? Well, you have a whole year. So during the year, my wife, who had a great advertising agency in her day, pretty creative, began to put some thought to it. And year 2, age 7 and 10, and this would be 1999, we went to New York. And we did the typical kids thing in New York. Coincidentally, our son had a master's in tax from NYU, so we could show where he lived. And we had been to New York so many times, we did everything for the kids. Ellis Island, the Statue of Liberty, da-da-da. They had a blast. They'll come back. Where next? So the where next takes a year, to the where next. So where next was, okay, let's do something exotic. Now, meanwhile, our son and daughter-in-law loved it. I mean, they had a free Christmas break. My daughter-in-law taught school. Everything was good. So where next? Okay. So where next became, London and Paris. So it's 5 days in London, 5 days in Paris. Each one, kind of fulfilling a dream. Places that we had been, my wife and I had been, but never been there with a youngster now 7 and 10, 8 and 11, and all kinds of very interesting issues come up. One gets sick, how do you deal with it? One doesn't get sick, how do you deal with it? Rain, pour. In fact, one of the funny things, we're in London, and it's Christmas Eve, and everything is of course, closed, except the pubs. We look at our pub, and the Rams are playing New Orleans, and it's live. So the older one said, Papa, let's go inside. You can't go into a pub. Give 'em money, and we can get in. Well, obviously that didn't work. So then the next year comes around, and, now this is really becoming something that they're looking forward to, we're looking forward to. My wife is creating puzzles and creating crossword puzzles and other kinds of puzzles. And during the year, they get various little hints, and we begin to figure it out. So Costa Rica became next. And each time, it became a little more creative, with no idea where the whole thing was going to lead. This was just a year-to-year thing. Meanwhile, I'm working, and, we get through it. So we do Costa Rica. So where next? Oh, my goodness gracious, where next? So the boys knew that I was stationed in Germany in the mid-'50s. After college, we all were drafted. And I flew home to get married, and they always wanted to see where we lived. So this was a trip to Nuremberg, Germany.
Very symbolic for a Jewish family.
Oh, my God. I can tell you this, too. Yep. When Deanne and I were there in 56, 57, they have a building, today it's there, too. It's called the Palace of Justice. And the Palace of Justice looks just like the City Hall that we have in St. Louis. It's very Gothic looking, brown stone, red stone. However, all the courts were in it. So the whole municipality was in this complex. So the Army rented a room for Jewish services. So for us to go to Jewish services on a Friday night, we had to pass the court where the trials were held. So you talk about introduction. This is 1956, just a few years after the war, 10 years after the trials. So anyway, we take the boys back, and we show them Nuremberg. We showed them where we lived. We introduced them to the grandson of our landlord who was there. And then on in to Austria, Italy. We skied down some mountains. And this really began to create bonding, and we loved it. Where else could grandparents really have 10 days, 2 weeks all to themselves? And, the boys had their room. We had our room. And these experiences just manifest themselves into relationships.
Let me interrupt for just a moment to get Dick into the conversation here, and we'll get on to some of the other places that you visited. But, Dick, I want to point out that you're a grandfather, are you not?
Yes, I am. Got two.
Okay, well, tell me what you learned about the grandparenting thing by doing the research for this book. And I gather from just listening to Paul here that you didn't have to work too hard at getting the narrative.
He's quite a storyteller, raconteur.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I wasn't doing so much writing as I was just transcribing. But, what I learned from Paul, and what I guess it was inspirational in some ways. One thing is, obviously, when you're taking your grandkids to Europe, that's costs quite a bit of money, and not everybody's going to be able to relate to that. But what it is that they were all in with their grandkids. And what they were, grandparenting goes in a lot of different directions, but sometimes grandparents are, I want to take the grandkids with me to do what I want. And, maybe they can learn from that. But what they did was they really listened to their grandkids and thought about, what is it that they want? What is it that they would enjoy? Where would they like to go? And I find that I had that in my own family. A grandma to my kids was just like that, and I had another grandma that was a little bit more like, I'll take you with me where I want to go. So they had both experiences. I'm not being judgmental there. It's just the different styles. And the Gallants were great listeners in terms of their grandkids.
Paul, did you go any place with the kids that you really didn't want to go but decided to do so because that's what the kids wanted?
Absolutely. And that was South Africa for a safari. I was never a lover of animals. I never loved going to the zoo. It happened to be one of the finest trips we ever could have had because you're out there, You're looking at the big five, the various animals. You're out in the middle of nowhere. The cell phones don't work, which was really kind of a.
One is working right now.
Yeah.
We better shut that off.
We got to shut that baby up. That was a trip that was never in my dreams. So, that was truly an outstanding trip.
You're all 7 continents you visited during these years.
What happened, and then we're going to get on to Melissa because Melissa's a story unto herself. We're in Australia, and that was continent number 5. And we told the boys that, okay, next year we're going to take their parents. And there was dismay. But we had to take them to go to Israel because my daughter-in-law had never been to Israel. We'd been there a number of times. Then we did South Africa. While we were in South Africa, we always had a wrap-up. The night before we left, my wife would sit down with a quiz. What's your favorite thing? What's your favorite trip? Okay. And the older one said, Papa, Grammy, it's over. It's over. I'm going to Vanderbilt. I'm going to start college. She's 18 years old. And I'm going to come home for the Christmas holidays, da-da-da. So 4 years go by while he went through Vanderbilt. And there was never a talk of another trip. And frankly, I don't think we thought of being on 6 continents with one more to go. The little one, in February of the year my grandson graduates Vanderbilt, calls me from a zoo. Papa, only been to 6 continents. What's wrong with number 7? Next day we booked it. So that's how we did Antarctica. And then the journey, that's the journey, the grand journey. It's over. We did all 7 continents.
And it is over. I mean, you haven't done anything since.
Not one thing. Yeah. I play golf with each one of them. That's it.
Well, that's terrific. So the relationship continues strong
Absolutely.
as ever. I've got to take a break. Yeah. We'll do that now. We're talking with Paul Gallant and Dick Weiss. They're talking about the grandparenting bonding that the Gallants did with their grandsons. We'll come back and talk about the granddaughter. That's a little bit of a different story. And then I want to talk about grandparenting in general and why grandparents are the way they are. Back in just a moment. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Thank you for listening to this St. Louis on the Air podcast supported by University College at Washington University, with undergraduate and graduate programs part-time, evening, and online. University College at Washington University, offering world-class education within reach.
And welcome back to our discussion about grandparents and grandparenting. Paul, Melissa was a different story. Melissa had some problems as a young granddaughter.
Right. And the summation of today is really you never give up. You have a vested love, okay, for your kids and your grandkids. No matter what their journeys are, if they're good people, you got to stay with the journey. And Dick knows this really, really well in interviewing Melissa. So Melissa at 14 left us. We gave her a very comfortable life. We thought we gave her a comfortable life. Went to live with her dad here in St. Louis. And they had all kinds of issues. She's thrown out of high school and wound up kind of living on the street. And called me when she was 18, 19 years old, and we kind of lost contact with her. And she said, Papa, I need help. Okay. I got her an apartment. We got her a car. She got a job. Okay. Kind of straightened her life up. And I said, one thing you have to do, you have to get the GED. You must get the GED. And if you don't get that in 120 days, the whole thing collapses. So there was a timeline, which she did. And she continued to live in this apartment, that apartment, that. And it disappeared for 3-4 years. On the road. Heard from her once or twice, basically in jail, okay? And or in a motel. Her dad would hear from her, and we'd be in touch, and maybe every 6 months between us, we'd have a call. After 3 or 4 years, I get a call again. She's home. She's back with her dad. I need help. So I go talk to her, and she had some legal issues which were solvable. So I had to certainly hire the better defense attorney. which I did. We got through the issues. It took a while. Loss of a driver's license, a little of this, a little of that. And she went to live on a farm that her dad had. After a number of years, and we were in contact. We'd see her, we'd talk.
All this time you're making these trips with her half-brothers, right?
No, with her cousins.
Oh, cousins.
With cousins, yeah. Oh, yeah, the whole time. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And so then I get a call. Actually, I come back from running on a Saturday, and there's a call. And it's from her, and she says, Papa, I'm going to go to the University of Missouri. Goes down on Monday with her dad. She's enrolled on Wednesday. She winds up graduating magna cum laude.
Wow.
And really straightens herself up, has a boyfriend, and now has our great-grandchild. So Dick really helped her through some of this, but you never give up.
Dick, how did you do that? How did you help?
Well, I should tell you, initially, when we started doing this book, I didn't even know about Melissa. We were just going to do a story about the boys, and I could sort of compare the boys to like Wally and the Beaver.
Yeah.
And Melissa was like Janis Joplin. And I said, Paul, if we have a problem with this, is that these trips with the boys went too well. There was not too much drama going on here. And he said, well, you want drama? You should talk to my granddaughter, Melissa.
It sure gave you a narrative, yeah.
Yeah, and then I come to see that she'd been on a journey of her own. I mean, I like the journey as a metaphor, but it's also literally true. She traveled all over the country, sometimes hitchhiking, sometimes hopping on trains. And she would tell me how she did that. I mean, you kind of sneak into a rail yard, and you got this booklet that tells you that people in the rail yard use to know where the trains are going, and she got one of those. And, I mean, she was a very smart, creative person, but a little bit, unmoored for part of her life. So, we got to talking about this, Melissa and me. And, I don't know, we probably did 3 or 4 several-hour interviews. And, maybe it was a little bit of therapy for her. Mm-hmm. I mean, that sometimes happens when you deal with people and help them tell their stories. But I think she just had a lot in her that she'd never really shared with anybody, at least all at once.
It's a great story. I mean, it really adds a lot of substance and muscle. It puts some meat on that bone, if you will. I want to take some calls, but before you do that, what's the status of the boys now? I mean, where are they?
The older one is a dentist having a very, very large dental practice, which he just bought, and he's 28. Melissa lives with her boyfriend down on a little farm outside of Columbia with a great-grandson. She's doing good. And the younger one is in the real estate business. So the 3 of them are all matured well, flourishing well. Yeah.
Will they follow, do you think, the example you set for them when they become grandparents?
I really think so. Yeah, look, they've traveled the world, and on their own they've traveled. Yeah. So I think they see the wanderlust, and I think they see the love that transcends generations.
That's so important. That's what this is really all about. Let's get some of the listeners into it. We'll start with Shelley calling from Sunset Hills. Shelley, thanks for waiting. You're on the air.
Hi, how are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. So my mom, I have 2 children, 21 and 16, and my mom, when I was raising them, would always be like, oh, I wasn't a good mom, and you didn't have everything. And I always told her, I said, you just wait. The measure of you as a parent is how your grandkids turn out. And, your grandkids are amazing, and I helped do that. and you helped me do that. So, parents that are really hard on themselves, just wait till your grandparents, and then you get to see how well of a parent you did.
Shelley, thanks so much for the call. This is kind of what I'm getting at. I don't know any grandparents that aren't transformed, Paul, by the grandkids. Right. Something happens when the grandkids come along. How do you explain that?
Well, one, you don't have a responsibility for parenting, which we had with Melissa. So that was, an anomaly unto itself. And it's unconditional love. And you're not with them that much. So you don't really see the warts. You really don't see the flaws because they're on the best behavior. You're on the best behavior. So I think it's relatively easy to be a grandparent. There are different rules.
Yeah. Plus, you're established. Dick, I'll get you to comment on this. The grandparent generally is old enough to be established and not being worried about the mortgage, perhaps, and not being worried about career. So those pressures are largely absent.
Yeah, I guess for the lucky some of us, that's absolutely true. I love the expression that grandchildren are your revenge on your children. And, I always like to say that with my grandkids, they've never thrown any tantrums with me because we give them everything they want.
It's easy.
Yeah, I mean, Oreos for breakfast, sure, no problem.
Who cares?
Ice cream anytime you want. But I think that, it is just, I had no idea what a joy it is to have grandchildren. I didn't even anticipate that. And it's just such a sweet thing to have. And I think being, step one is just being present for them, and engaging with them and, trying to look at the world through their eyes. I mean, you get another chance to do that. And then, of course, when you're done with that, you can just send them home.
Yeah, that's always the punchline with the grandparents. Leslie Stahl, a CBS correspondent, wrote a book on grandparenting about a year ago, and we talked to her, and she investigated this phenomenon the way she would attack a news story. And she discovered that there's a hormonal change that takes place in grandparents when the grandchild is born, that it is exactly the same hormonal balance that occurs when you fall in love. So I thought that was an interesting way to put it.
It's good.
Let's take a couple more calls as time allows. We'll start secondarily with John calling from Florissant. Go ahead, John, you're on the air.
Thanks, Don, for the program. I'm a grandfather of twins. They're 5 years old, and my daughter wanted a child in her life. She got two, and they live with me and my wife, and they're a joy, they're a pleasure. I tell people who have got grandchildren, I hope you enjoy them as much as I have. I have two older grandchildren, but these are twins, a boy, girl, and they're exciting. Every day it's a new day. It's a thrill of having them every day.
John, thank you. You sound very much like a very typical grandparent, doesn't he, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Another call. Katie joins us from St. Louis. Go ahead, Katie. You're on the air.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call.
Sure.
From the day I was born until the respective days 6 years ago when I delivered both of their eulogies, my grandparents were my very best friends in the entire world. And a tradition that they developed that my family now carries on after they are now gone is Sunday family dinner. All of their 6 kids and many of their brothers and sisters and all the grandkids and neighbors and randoms would come over every Sunday for more than 30 years for a big Italian dinner. My Irish grandma Kitty married my all-Sicilian grandpa Joe and learned the cooking secrets from his mother. And now my mom, it's very important to her, now that they're gone, to carry on that tradition. We celebrate birthdays as a family. Everybody knows 5 o'clock Sunday, that's where you're going to be. And I think it has kept the family together in a really special way.
No doubt it has. Katie, thanks for the call. She raises an important point, Paul, and that is that the younger people, the grandkids, can learn a lot from the older folks. They've been around for a while, and they know the score pretty much of the time.
Well, and the beauty of spending concentrated periods of time is the family stories come out. So the boys and Melissa, who we raised, really understand the roots. They understand the grandparents coming from Russia. They understand that they couldn't speak English. So they have a whole history. Plus, they really get to know you. They get to know your work ethic, your morals, what you're all about. And you see little pieces of this that go into those grandkids. Yeah. It's little pieces of it.
Yeah. Dick, we're going to have to wrap this up. Do you have a final thought about grandparenting you can give us?
Yeah, I think Paul touched on it, and your caller touched on it as well, is that grandparents are actually, the family, in many ways, the family historians. And raising good children, I think, requires their understanding of where they came from and what their families are all about. It gives them something to live up to, or in some cases, not to repeat. But they're lessons that the grandparents share, and it doesn't have to be in an overbearing way, and you don't have to write a book. But I think it's really important for families that are privileged, and also extremely important with families that are have disadvantages. It's a way of tethering yourself to, finding a North Star in your life, to know your family story.
Yeah, I can attest to the fact that you have a lifetime of regret if you have not asked those questions, and then it becomes too late and you'll never get the answers. Right. That's a very sad thing. I have to wrap it up. Paul Gallant, thank you so much for being here. You tell a great story, and you've got great grandkids, obviously, largely because of what you and your wife and their parents have done. Let's hope so. That's good. Thank you for being with us. Dick Weiss, thank you. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Don.
This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association. Missouri produces wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details on the variety of products made in the state are at choosewood.com.